Okay, this has been beaten to death. This guy's bringing up Pascal's wager again. I'm just going to read from The God Delusion, not because I worship Richard Dawkins, but because he is a far more eloquent writer and speaker than I am. So, here's what Richard Dawkins has to say about Pascal's wager. The great French mathematician Blaise Pascal reckoned that, however long the odds against God's existence might be, there is an even larger asymmetry in the penalty for guessing wrong. You'd better believe in God, because if you are right, you stand to gain eternal bliss, and if you are wrong, it won't make any difference anyway. On the other hand, if you don't believe in God, and you turn out to be wrong, you get eternal damnation, whereas if you are right, it makes no difference. On the face of it, the decision is a no-brainer. Believe in God. There is something distinctly odd about the argument, however. Believing is not something you can decide to do as a matter of policy. At least it is not something I can decide to do as an act of will. I can decide to go to church, and I can decide to recite the Nicene Creed, and I can decide to swear on a stack of Bibles that I believe every word inside of them. But none of that can make me actually believe it if I don't. Pascal's wager could only ever be an argument for feigning belief in God. And the God that you claim to believe in had better not be of the omniscient kind, or you'd see through the deception. The ludicrous idea that believing is something you can decide to do is deliciously mocked by Douglas Adams in Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, where we meet the robotic electric monk, a labor-saving device that you buy to do your believing for you. The deluxe model is advertised as capable of believing things they wouldn't believe in Salt Lake City. But why, in any case, do we so readily accept the idea that the one thing you must do if you want to please God is believe in Him? What's so special about believing? Isn't it just as likely that God would reward kindness, or generosity, or humility, or sincerity? What if God is a scientist who regards honest seeking after truth as the supreme virtue? Indeed, wouldn't the designer of the universe have to be a scientist? Bertrand Russell was asked what he would say if he died and found himself confronted by God, demanding to know why Russell had not believed in him. Not enough evidence, God. Not enough evidence, was Russell's, I almost said immortal, reply. Mightn't God respect Russell for his courageous skepticism, let alone for the courageous pacifism that landed him in prison in the First World War, far more than he would respect Pascal for his cowardly bet hedging? And while we cannot know which way God would jump, we don't need to know in order to refute Pascal's wager. We are talking about a bet, remember, and Pascal was not claiming that his wager enjoyed anything but very long odds. Would you bet on God's valuing dishonestly faked belief, or even honest belief, over honest skepticism? Then again, suppose the God who confronts you when you die turns out to be Baal, and suppose Baal is just as jealous as his old rival Yahweh was said to be. Mightn't Pascal have been better off wagering on no God at all, rather than on the wrong God? Indeed, doesn't the sheer number of potential gods and goddesses on whom one might bet vitiate Pascal's whole logic? Pascal was probably joking when he promoted his wager, just as I am joking in my dismissal of it. But I have encountered people, for example, in the question session after a lecture, who have seriously advanced Pascal's wager as an argument in favor of believing in God, so it was right to give it a brief airing here. Is it possible, finally, to argue for a sort of anti-Pascal wager? Suppose we grant that there is indeed some small chance that God exists. Nevertheless, it could be said that you will lead a better, fuller life if you bet on his not existing than if you bet on his existing, and therefore squander your precious time on worshiping him, sacrificing to him, fighting and dying for him, etc. I won't pursue the question here, but readers might like to bear it in mind when we come to later chapters on the evil consequences that can flow from religious belief and observance.